Hello everybody and welcome to yet again another One Piece video. This week was quite a week for One Piece content. In all my years of being a One Piece fan, I've never seen a color spread be talked about more than the actual chapter itself. And normally you would think that that means that the chapter was boring, but we actually got a pretty significant lore bomb this time. It's actually kind of a game changer if you ask me. Also, speaking of changes, Yamato's gender. But before we get into any of that, we got Zoro versus King in the anime last night. I don't usually say this, but that anime episode was crazy. Not normal crazy, not the crazy that you spell C-R-A-Z-Y. No, I'm talking C-R-A-Y-Z-E-E-E crazy. The studio definitely outdid the source material the episode was based on this time. Love the extra content that we got between Kaido and King during the flashback. Them taking out some marine fodder was great. Great sentimental value was added by playing the Sword of Vows track, which is the same track that they play when First Mate Rayleigh remembers Roger's last words to him. So it really works to emphasize the captain and First Mate bond that is depicted in the episode. Apparently Zoro can fly now. He's able to earthbend and summon rocks right at the right time to find his footing in the air. The anime made it seem like he's running through dimensions or something, just producing lightning and levitating. I mean, look at this right here. That is not Zoro. That is a demented creature that was let loose and came out of the underworld and is out for blood. There was like some spirit bomb action by the end there as well. And the music, was that a new track or something? I think they used a new track. It was like some ancient kingdom, ancient dragon, Lunarian theme that they used here. Now I'll be talking about the significance of the dragon a little bit later in this video, but man, like great episode. I would say like amazing episode. Go watch it if you haven't. If you've already seen it, go watch it again. I'm not kidding. There's this scene where King is in his pteranodon form and he starts acting and sounding like a UFO as he attacks Zoro. So I'm wondering if this could be taken as more evidence that Lunarians and the winged races of One Piece are actually supposed to be considered aliens. Also, when Kaido first finds him, Alber yells out, "Let us out," which to me means that maybe he was taken to Punk Hazard with a group of people from his own race. So I guess that means that there were other Lunarians there with him or were taken in with him. Also, one last thing, and massive credit to the people who worked on this episode. When King uses Imperial Flaming Wings, if you pause the episode repeatedly after this shot, you will see transitions of him growing up. You first see him as a child, then as a teenager, then as the masked man that he became, and then finally as a pteranodon. In the span of I think it's like a second that you see these flashes. Amazing work. The amount of detail that went into this is outstanding. Tell me your Toei's favorite without telling me your Toei's favorite. They even closed off the episode with that classic El Zorro Z. I would legitimately be shocked and baffled if the Kid-in-Law versus Big Mom fight, or if what's left of the Luffy versus Kaido fight ends up being better than this. Because what's remaining of the Luffy versus Kaido fight has to be split up, right? It has to be divided. Because it's several chapters worth that are left. So I don't know if they're just going to pick one chapter. I don't know if they're just going to invest fully in chapter 1044 and let the other chapters slide. But regardless, as of right now, this fight, this episode, is not only one of the best fights in Wano, it's one of the best fights in the entire series. This might be my recency bias speaking, but I'm willing to say that only Luffy versus Lucci beats this. All right, now taking things back to the color spread here, my first observation is that I think it's pretty obvious that Oda was trying to compensate / complement the last color spread that he did that featured all of the Straw Hat guys napping around. I think he thought to himself, okay, I've dedicated the previous color spread to the guys, so now I'm going to do one for the ladies. I'm pretty sure that Ulti's top says Devil Sister, and then Nami's shirt, I'm pretty sure says Weather Queen. And so from a visual standpoint, looking at their outfits and their poses, it kind of seems like Ulti and Nami are competing with each other because they're both jumping into the water in the same way. The only thing about that though is that unlike Nami, Ulti is a devil fruit user. Plus she's also carrying a giant metal club, so if there's water at the bottom and that's where Ulti is headed, she's gonna run into some problems. I'm pretty sure that the swimming tube that Carrot is carrying is actually Zeus because he has the same hat as him. And then it seems Perona is wearing a Kuma shirt. Also, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure Tashigi's shirt says Oni. Also, I think Vivi's top is pretty interesting because not only does it have a picture of a tiger on it, but given the strange color of the tiger, I'm actually tempted to think that this implies that maybe Fujitora will have something to do with Vivi in the future. Because Oda had Igura mention that he was worried about Vivi getting snatched up and kidnapped by a strange bird, and she eventually ended up with Morgan's. Plus, another one of his fears was that a giant meteor would come crashing down, falling from the sky. And just last chapter, we saw Fujitora say that he was going to bring down a meteor. Then again, I also wonder if Fujitora might actually help Vivi escape the situation, because it was thanks to King Cobra's and King Riku's intervention during the Reverie that allowed for the abolishment of the Chichibukai system, which is what Fujitora wanted. So Fujitora could soon be like, Princess Vivi, out of respect for your deceased father who helped me achieve my goal and who was recently murdered in cold blood, I will help you escape this predicament that you find yourself in. Put her in your mouth and go, Wapple. We also know that Cobra and Fujitora spoke briefly during the Reverie, so maybe it was the case that just like Cobra asked Pell and Shaka to take care of Vivi, maybe he also asked Fujitora to take care of Vivi as well, in case things went south. And on a somewhat possibly connected note, there's also a flower that is called the tiger lily. It's a flower that is said to be native to Japan, and that's just the beginning of the list of connections that we can make between Lily and the present time. So more on that later. Bonnie's plotline, I believe, gets resolved in this one chapter, because she pretty much meets up with Sabo briefly. He carries her bridal style, and then they part ways, saying that she's going to Egghead. So that kind of takes care of her. And I think I just realized something from the dialogue in this scene. Oh boy. If it's true, it's big. It's pretty major stuff connected to the Egghead incident that is about to go down. It just came to me. Wow. I think this is probably my first holy shit moment that I've had while I've been recording. You know what? I'm going to say the exact same thing that I said with my Davy Jones theory. If it turns out to be true, great. But if it turns out not to be true, it doesn't really matter. Because I do think that it fits so well that I want to explore it further. Now, there's still some stuff that I want to get to first. I still need to cover the Yamato situation, and I have to go over Lily's history as well. So I'll probably end up saving the discovery for the end. A lot of the stuff with Cobra, though, is basically a history lesson that I think most of us already knew. I think it's more of a sort of a recap for a lot of people that might have forgotten some things. I do like, though, how this makes things a little bit more clear in terms of the transition of power that happened when the government was established. Because Cobra mentions that after the 20 families moved to Marijoa, or in this case, I guess it would be the 19 families, after those families moved up to Marijoa, they had to pick other families to rule over the kingdoms that they left behind. So for example, the Don Quixote family ended up picking the Riku family to rule over Dressrosa in their absence. The only exception to that would be the House of Nefertari, which decided to stay behind down in Alabasta to continue to rule their kingdom instead of going up to Marijoa. Except now we learn that the true queen ruler of Alabasta never made it home after she decided not to stay. And speaking of Nefertari refusing to go along with the world government, something that I found very odd is that we know that Wano in the past was known as the country of gold, and yet I don't remember seeing a whole lot of gold in Wano. However, I do recall seeing some golden dragon statues in Fishman Island and also in the Alabasta bathrooms. And there is a dragon metal statue that we saw in Onigashima, but it's not made out of gold. And so I'm thinking, okay, what do Wano, Fishman Island, and Alabasta actually have in common? Well, both Wano and Fishman Island have an ancient weapon each, and then the poneglyph in Alabasta lets you know where Pluton is hidden. Plus, we know that Wano was not affiliated with the government. They decided to close their borders. We also know that it took a long time for Ryugu Kingdom to be recognized by the world government as such, because there was a lot of discrimination. And then we have Nefertari Lily, who told the world government, I'm not living with you guys up there. So if Alabasta, Fishman Island, and Wano were not cool with the government, but they were cool with each other, maybe they were part of a secret alliance that supported Joy Boy before the Void Century. And maybe the dragon statues that we've seen in those kingdoms can actually explain why the celestial dragons are called celestial dragons in the first place, because they have the dragon claw as their symbol. So what if they stole all of that from the people of the ancient kingdom? Like, what if the people of the ancient kingdom had like a dragon theme to them, but then once the 20 countries came together and defeated the ancient kingdom and became the world government appropriated all of that stuff and started using the dragon theme and symbolism as their own. Now, just focusing on Lily for a moment here, there's a lot of connections that we can make between that name and other things in the One Piece world. So for starters, the name continues the Alabasta family female lineage in a way, in terms of the structure of the names being very similar. But if the name Lily is also supposed to be interpreted as the name of the flower, then you could also have a potential connection there between Lily and Amazon Lily. Because the thing about Amazon Lily, aside from it being the island of women, is that every woman from that island is actually named after a flower. Hancock is the name of a flower, Marigold is also a flower, Sandersonia is also a flower, even Shockey's full name is referencing a flower. power, because her name means peony. And one of the first times we ever got to see Imu in this story, Imu was in a place called the Chamber of Flowers. Violet, is also named after a flower plant. And I've mentioned before how I think there might be something more to her than meets the eye, because she has the ability to see through things and read people's minds. And she also has the ability to create whale figures out of her tears, which takes me back to Zoe during the Odin flashback when both Roger and Odin mentioned that they felt uncomfortable in Zoe because they felt like they were being watched. Also, Cobra mentioned that Vivi looks a lot like her mom, so if the genes are that strong, maybe that's why Imu was holding a picture of Vivi, because Imu was reminded of Lily. Now, in terms of Lily's connection to Joy Boy and the events prior to the Void Century, given that we know that the Kingdom of Alabasta is based off of the land of Egypt, if we do a little historical digging, we'll find that there was a very famous queen of Egypt named Nefertari. And so during my research, I found 3 historical facts that I think Oda might have drawn inspiration from and decided to use as a template for things in the actual story. The first is that in his writings, the pharaoh, Ramses II, would describe Nefertari, his wife, as so enchanting and so beautiful that he would refer to her as the one for whom the sun shines. Not coincidentally, the flag of Alabasta, the symbol of Alabasta, is actually a sun. Which, by the way, the fact that Nefertari was supposed to be incredibly beautiful reminded me of the fact that we never really got an explanation for why it was that Blackbeard wanted Hancock's devil fruit power. Another key thing about Queen Nefertari of Egypt is that, just as Cobra mentions in the story, the queen was known for writing letters because she was a diplomat. And specifically, there was one letter that was found that she wrote to another queen stating that she would like the alliance between their 2 kingdoms to last forever. Now, Cobra doesn't go into detail about what the letter that Lily wrote says, but we can at least infer from his dialogue that the letter mentions the will of D or the family of D. Now, one of the things that I found was that Queen Nefertari of Egypt was very well educated for her time, to the point where she could actually read hieroglyphs. Hieroglyphs, poneglyphs, I think the inspiration for that is obvious. In case you don't know, in real life, the hieroglyphs were the writing system used by the Egyptians, and so the system used little pictures/symbols to convey meaning. And the reason why this is relevant is because it actually adds more insight in terms of understanding what the D initial actually means. Now, this is actually a pretty old fan theory that I read a long time ago, but I'm pretty sure that that theory must have originated from somebody reading one of the SBS sections for Volume 8, because in that volume, a fan asks Oda, what does the D initial mean in Monkey D. Luffy's name? To which Oda responds that he's gotten a ridiculous amount of letters asking about the same thing, but that he cannot answer that question yet. And then Oda goes on to say, for now, don't worry about it. Just read it as D. So when somebody tells you, hey, come over here, I'm going to tell you how to pronounce this. I'm going to tell you how to read this, right? That kind of gets you to think, like, is there another way of reading this? Because Oda actually says, like, for now, just read it as a D. And in a way, that kind of implies that it's not supposed to be read as a D. And so it's like, okay, well, what else could it mean? And so the fan theory says that the D is actually a symbol. It's actually a picture. So the picture, according to the fan theory, is that the D is actually a half moon. So the people of the family of D are descendants of the people that came from the moon, the people of the ancient kingdom that came from outer space. And this actually takes it back to Skypiea, to chapter 1053, which according to Oda features one of his favorite panels that he's ever drawn. And it's the one where Luffy and his crew are dancing around the fire. And it also happens to be the hint of foreshadowing for the Nika pose. And interestingly enough, the way that chapter ends is with a shot of the night sky featuring the half moon. And something that I just realized right now is that it would make much more sense for the D to actually be a picture instead of the letter D, because if the D is actually an initial for a word, then that would mean that Oda would need to find this universal word that fits all of the languages that One Piece is being read in. Like, he would have to find a word that starts with D in English, in Japanese, in Spanish, in German, in French, in all these other languages. So that would be very difficult. Whereas if it's just the picture of the half moon, that symbol is more globally accepted. It's more universal. People know what that would mean, regardless of their language. I want to close off this point by mentioning the title of a chapter, which is also part of the Skypiea arc. This is chapter 292, which is pretty sad because it's about 2 friends that never really got to reconnect, to reunite when they were alive. But the promise still remains, right? That promise of reconnecting at some point, in some way, shape, or form, is still present by the end of the flashback. And so the title of the chapter is To Meet Like the Half Moon Hidden by the Clouds. Beneath the moon we'll meet again, the winds are lullaby. Binkusu no sake wo todoke ni yukuyo. So if you have two half moons, right, that look like D's and put them together, you get a full moon, or an O. An O for One Piece. So the D, which is actually an incomplete moon, a half moon, will only be completed by the end of the series when the One Piece, the O, turns out to be real. That kind of goes along perfectly with Dofi saying that the family of D has been hiding in the shadow of history. Now, in terms of featuring Yamato in the color spread, I think it's very clearly another attempt from Oda to generate discussion. And unless you've been living under a rock when it comes to One Piece, you already know that it works like a charm. This is not the first time that Yamato has been a part of an all-female lineup. Before Yamato debuted in the anime, there was an official promotional video published in the official One Piece YouTube channel that was all about female empowerment, which featured some of the female characters of the series, and Yamato was a part of that as well. Now, one thing that I did make a mental note of last year was that even after the Yamato Wano bath scene, I believe there were two instances where Sanji sees Yamato and Sanji refers to Yamato as Yamato-chan. Now, you won't find it in the official translation because the official manga in English decided to do away with Japanese honorifics and suffixes. But in the original RAWs, in the original Japanese language of the manga, you will find that Sanji calls Yamato Yamato-chan. And so, of course, we know that chan in Japanese is typically a suffix that somebody would use to refer to a girl, right? Like Sakura-chan. So we have chan for girls and then kun, like Sasuke-kun, for boys. So the fact that Sanji kept calling Yamato Yamato-chan even after the Wano bath scene was interesting to me, because that's Oda writing that. Then again, Morley calls Kuma Kuma-chan. So there's that factor in this as well. But the bottom line here is this. I've been reading One Piece for a very long time now. And so I think I have a pretty good understanding of what Oda's values are. He's a lot like Luffy in a way, where Luffy just wants to get people together. He just wants people to show up to the party and have fun with him. And so with that in mind, I think the conclusion that we can draw is the following. If Oda really wanted Yamato to be considered a female, then he would not have included Yamato in the boys' bathroom scene in Wano. At the same time, if Oda really wanted Yamato to be considered a male, then he would not have included Yamato in this week's cover page with all the girls. So ultimately, I do believe that Oda completely agrees with the speech that he wrote for Bon Clay back in Alabasta when he says that one may stray from the path of a man and one may stray from the path of a woman, but there is no straying from the path of being human. We get a bit of action in the courtyard from Leo and Sai, both of whom end up using attacks against Saint Charlos that we previously saw them use in Dressrosa. And I think it's kind of cool that the two characters that are attacking a celestial dragon are actually part of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. So they're really doing a good job of representing Luffy in this situation, because that's exactly what Luffy would do. And because of the incident here, we now know what attempted murder Morgans was referring to when he was thinking about using that as a headline. Morley shows up out of nowhere, which means that he was able to get free of Green Bull. So the off-screen Nomi was used once again in the story and allows Morley to evade an admiral. So yeah, Morley shows up and takes Kuma away, which, just like in Bonnie's case, I'm pretty sure that this puts an end to Kuma's plotline here during this flashback of Reverie. Now, in that scene where we see Bonnie with Sabo and they're hiding, one of the guards says the following. He says, "When people go missing, it's usually because they saw it." And then another guard says, "Saw it?" And then the first guard says, "Something they shouldn't have." Like what? The Lost Chamber. I believe one of the earlier translations called it the Phantom Room or something like that. And so I thought that was very interesting because I was thinking, are they referring to the freezer? You know, the room that we saw Imu walk into and see the giant straw hat in? Because here's the thing. We know that Kuma right now is trying to get to Marijoa, right? Is he trying to get to this Lost Chamber? Is he trying to get to this room? And if so, why? Because here's what I'm thinking. We know that the ancient giant, the giant armor that we saw in Egghead, was originally in Marijoa. It climbed up the red line and it got to Marijoa. Apparently it ran out of fuel and now it's in Egghead. It's in a secret room in Egghead. Now it's not very clear how you get to that room from within Egghead because Luffy and his friends just kind of sort of like ended up there by accident. And there was like some weird phasing thing going on between Vegapunk and the Giant, which wasn't really explained in full detail. However, I do remember that when York spoke to the Seraphim, she deliberately told them, there is one room in Egghead that I don't want you to mess with. There's one room that I don't want you to touch. And we know that York wants to become a celestial dragon. So could it be possible that this phantom room, that this lost chamber, is actually a room that connects Egghead to Marijoa? And maybe that's how the Giant that was originally in Marijoa ended up being transported to Egghead, and maybe that's why Kuma really wants to get to Marijoa, so that he can use the chamber to get to Bonney a lot faster, because he tried using the power of his Pawpaw Fruit, and he just crashed into the red line. Plus, it's not like traveling with the power of the Pawpaw Fruit is instantaneous. It's not like teleportation, because we saw Luffy flying for some time before he got to Amazon Lily. Maybe that's why Saturn is being dispatched to Egghead, because he can use the chamber to get back to Marijoa a lot faster. Plus, it also sustains the illusion that there is no connection between Marijoa and Egghead, which is why, as some of the guards mention in this chapter, if somebody finds out about the secret chamber, they mysteriously go missing. Because maybe the government doesn't want people to know that there's a secret pathway between Marijoa and an outer island, because then if people find out, they can use that pathway to invade Marijoa. Because just from a narrative standpoint, I think that once we get to the final war, there has to be some kind of a plot device that allows for the main characters to travel from the New World, far out in the New World, back to Marijoa a lot faster than just sailing on a boat. Because I think sailing would just take too much time. And I think there's going to be a sense of urgency during the final battle that won't allow for, just trips on the ocean back to Marijoa. Maybe that's why Kid and Law lost their ships, because by the end game, it's not even going to matter. People are going to be warping all over the place. I'm also glad that the chapter clarified that it was actually Lily's younger brother that took care of things after she vanished, because there have been mentions of previous Alabasta kings, so that kind of fits. Also, a big question that was brought up this week was, could Lily actually be Emu? Is Emu actually a woman? Was there perhaps some romance involved in the story of the Void Century? Lots of really good speculation, lots of great content, lots of stuff to discuss. Thank you so much for watching and for supporting the videos that I upload with likes and subscriptions and comments and all that stuff that you do. You already know how much I value that and appreciate that. But thanks again. I hope you have a good rest of the day. Have a great week. Take care, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.